Do you ever just not know what to talk about on a date? Or maybe you want to get better at building connections? On this episode, you're going to get tons of tips and inspiration for questions to ask in early dating, what questions to avoid, and how to talk about uncomfortable things that might come up without derailing your date. We're also going to get into the number one topic to bring up on a first or second date that most daters regret not bringing up sooner. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia. I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating dating and relationships with confidence and ease, whether you've been on dating for a while or you're just getting started. I believe dating can be fun, especially getting to know someone for the first few dates if you can have great conversations. I am so excited to get into it today, and I want to remind you that you can drop your questions about dating and relationships in the comments on Spotify for me to answer on the podcast. So today I have a few to answer, so we'll do them at the end. The questions I'm answering have to do with misalignment in relationship expectations, clarification on being friend zoned, and communication around physical intimacy issues. Stay tuned at the end, and we'll get into those. So, speaking of questions, I'm going to get into a lot of them today. This episode is about conversations and how to keep them going, how to enjoy them. So, I'm going to go through a list of questions and just know that if you want an actual physical list of these questions that you can read and save somewhere on your phone, head to the show notes below and grab the link to download all of these questions for free. There's over 80 of them, okay, for various situations. They're really fun to create for you, so I hope you enjoy it. You can download that in the show notes for free. So let's start with a quick reminder of what the point of early dating is. Why are we in this process? The point of early dating is to figure out if you want to keep getting to know them. You're not going to figure out if someone's marriage material in 3 dates, but you can figure out by date 3 if you want to go on date 4 and 5 and so on. And while you do this, yes, you're going to learn things about them that either show you they might be who you're looking for or not. But how does this happen? Well, it happens by one, having experiences together, meaning dates that aren't just sitting down and having dinner or drinks or dessert. It means like making memories together, doing something that kind of gets you out of your comfort zone or is a little different, or where you're interacting with something that isn't just each other, right? That's what I mean by having experiences together. It also happens by observing their actions, like paying attention to whether or not they follow through on the things they say about what they're going to do, about who they are, and all that. And the last way this happens is talking about your lives, like your future goals and your past experiences. Today, we're focusing on the third one, specifically looking at questions to ask and what questions to avoid on dates. The overall advice of this episode, by the way, is to ask questions. Ask any question. It's better to ask questions than not, even if they're not great, especially for the guys listening. And I know women sometimes have this issue too. Like, none of these issues are truly gender specific, but I hear about this issue from way more women than men. And the issue is that men typically don't ask enough questions on dates, or it's the other side of the pendulum where they're just firing off questions back to back like an interview. So, to the guys listening, ask questions on dating apps when texting and especially on dates. It shows interest, curiosity, and basic social skills. I have a whole episode, by the way, on what to do when they don't ask questions and why this happens, and I'll link it below. But since you're a good dater and you're listening to this podcast, that will not be the reason someone's going to text their friend or DM me after a date and say, wow, they didn't ask me one question. So, here are some general tips for asking better questions that will lead to better date conversations. Because again, we're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy and be present with each other and learn about each other. And that happens through conversation. The first tip is that yes or no questions are fine, but you need a follow up. Like the classic, do you have siblings? Yes or no. It's a yes or no question. And if they say, yeah, I have a sister, yeah, I have a brother, whatever, you need to go further than that. The conversation can't just end with that answer. Don't just move on to the next question. Follow that thread. Another tip is to ask questions about things you love talking about. Like if you have a pet, ask if they do. Or, maybe you can ask how they feel about cats or dogs or whatever. If you love going to festivals, ask if they've ever been to one. That's usually a good place to start if you're stuck, right? By focusing on things you love and bringing that into the conversation. And my favorite tip for a date, if you are nervous or you don't know what to talk about, is to just start in the middle. Like start talking to them as if they're already your friend, but obviously, give them a little context. I think there's a tricky balance to this one because you want to start in the middle, tell them about your life, tell them what's going on today, what you're dealing with right now in life at work, but you don't want to go overboard. For example, I once went out with a guy twice who would launch into his work drama, just go on and on and on about the people he works with. But I didn't care because, frankly, I didn't even care about him yet, let alone his work drama. This actually happened a few times with different guys. You have to remember that if this person sitting across from you needs to be invested in you before they're really invested in your work drama or family stuff or whatever else is going on. You're allowed to say that you've been dealing with stuff, but you don't need to launch into the whole backstory unless, of course, they're like really asking questions and want to get into it. All right. With those general tips out of the way, let's get into the top 10 best date questions. And I want to remind you that you can get a full list, including these questions, below in the show notes. You could download them for free. You can save them on your phone so you'll always have them handy. So I'm kind of going against my own rule here of not memorizing questions and coming into a date with a list. But I know it's fun to share question inspiration. So when in doubt, ask questions about things you are into and care about. That's a great way to see if you have stuff in common and of course enjoy the conversation. Okay, the first one is, and these aren't in any particular order, so keep that in mind. The first one on my list is if money was no object, how would you spend your day? The alternative, where would you live if money wasn't a factor? I like this question because it gets you into dream mode with your date, which is a really fun space to play in when you're talking to someone new. You can learn a little bit about what they want, what they desire, and of course, their money values. What do they like spending money on? What do they want to spend money on? That can tell you a lot about someone. And of course, while talking, you might find that you actually have zero overlap in how you would want to spend your days. Like you also learn about what they value in life and in their lifestyle. The second question on the list is what is something you're looking forward to? Again, another positive question to get into, something that they're excited for. This can easily lead into a conversation about goals and desires, similar to the first question, which again is a really fun space to play in a date because it's like energizing, right? To talk about the things that you are working toward. And I mean, I don't know, I think that you can explore this topic in so many different ways and it can lead a lot into a lot of different directions, which is kind of the point of these questions, right? You want to be able to follow different threads of conversation. So these are just like the starting point. The third question is if you weren't here with me right now, what would you be doing? So this is a good way to get into each other's weekly routines. Like, how do they spend a typical weeknight or weekend evening if you're on the date during the weekend? What does it usually look like? What would they be doing? What would they be watching? What would they be cooking, eating, whatever? I love this question. It's a very easy one. All right, number four is what are you reading, watching, listening to, playing? So if you're someone who's super into reading, gaming, TV, movies, podcasts, find out what your date likes too. See if you can maybe even discover something new, like a new book recommendation or podcast recommendation that you would love to get into. And then you can connect on that after your date. So, this is such an easy, low hanging fruit topic. I mean, it's hard to find someone who doesn't engage in some kind of media, whether that's books, TV, gaming, or whatever. So, get into it. This is a great place to start for pretty much any type of person you're on a date with. Okay, number five isn't technically a question, but it is tell me about your friends. Tell me about your friends. This can lead to a conversation about how they met their core friend group. Maybe they're like childhood best friends or new friends they've made recently. You know, how they all met, what they do together. There's a lot here. And of course, you can learn about how they value friendship, what activities they like to do with their friends, if they have friends, and all that stuff. All right, sixth question is what is the story behind your name? Another super easy question to ask virtually everyone. I mean, we all have names. This can easily expand to what's their middle name, their last name, their family lineage and heritage, or their parents, or any fun story about their name. I mean, also, you could have the conversation about what you were supposed to be named. Fun fact about me, my name was supposed to be Montana after Joe Montana because my dad was obsessed with the 49ers. Like, imagine that conversation on a date could lead in so many different directions. Number seven, What's something you've done but wouldn't do again? This is a great way to share a funny or embarrassing story or talk about each other's past experiences, like maybe a travel experience or work experience, something in school. There's a lot of different ways you can go here with this one and learn about each other in terms of past experiences, because a lot of the other questions are focused on future things. Number 8 is, what do you want to do but keep putting off? So this is another way to get into dream mode and talking about goals and like maybe habits they wanna pick up, skills they wanna learn. This is a little bit, I would say, less positive than the other questions that I brought up before, but it's still a good way to figure out how ambitious they are or, like, what they would like to do if they had more time, or something that they really care about that maybe they just haven't had a chance to fit into their life. It's a good way to talk about passions, again, that maybe don't fit into your life right now, but one day you could, work towards them. All right, the ninth question is, what is your favorite thing about yourself? I love this question. It can be very revealing, and you can learn about how they see themselves and if they have a healthy amount of self esteem and self confidence. Some people might be very uncomfortable with this question. Like, I don't think this is a question people normally think about. If you are listening to this right now, like, I would reflect on it. What is your favorite thing about yourself? What would your answer be? And is that even comfortable for you to think about? But I think this is a fun, positive way to get into like talking about who you both are, and how you perceive yourself and qualities you appreciate in a person. So, yeah, try that one out. I'm curious to see how it goes. And the 10th question is, what cheers you up on a bad day? I like this question as a way to get into self care, therapy, and mental health topics, which I think are really important to explore. And again, you can talk about this without going deep into what causes a bad day or like things going on in your life that are kind of hard to deal with. And we'll get into that later in the episode. But I think talking about what tools, systems, resources are already in place to take care of yourselves is a good thing to see if you connect on or not, see if you have alignment on or not. Sometimes the answer might be, I don't know, or nothing, or even I don't have bad days. I don't know. Like their answer could surprise you, but I still think this is a fun question to play with on a date. So, again, if you want more inspiration for questions, check out the free guide below in the show notes. These 10 questions are just a good place to start, but of course, there are just an endless amount of questions you could try on for a first date. I think I'm sharing this list because if you're in a rut right now or if you're nervous about your date, these are just some ideas to get you going, get those creative juices flowing, to have more interesting and fun conversations on a date that go beyond what do you have siblings, where are you from, like all those small talk topics that you're going to get into anyway, but the date will be more memorable if you get into some off the beaten track topics like this. So what you might notice about the questions we went through is that they're personal without being invasive. Remember that trust has to be earned and built. If someone dodges a question, it just might mean that they don't trust you enough yet or know you well enough yet, and that's okay. Be open to this and aware of this, because some people are just less open, some people are more open. And it's not initially a red flag if they don't want to share their entire life story with you, a stranger on a first date. So, especially on a first, second date, if they seem a little guarded, I don't think that's like a major red flag. Some people just take time to open up more. Before we move on to the number one question that people fail to ask on a date a lot, but more often than not, I just want to share a couple general questions that will help you keep a conversation going without falling into interview mode. So, when you're talking, like you've got to dive deep and ask follow up questions and make comments. Don't just ask a question, have them answer, and then move on to the next one. That is what makes dates feel like robotic interviews. You need to learn how to linger on topics. So, here are some ways to keep a conversation going. You can ask them, have you always felt that way? Right? About whatever you're talking about. And maybe they share an opinion about something or they talk about their passion for something. Have you always felt that way? Is a good way to see if they've changed their mind on something. I don't know. A classic one is tell me more. If there's anything they seem to light up about when they're talking about it, the tell me more is a great line to use. If they already seem passionate about this topic, let them cook. Let them dive into whatever that topic is and let them nerd out a little bit. I think the tell me more is a great one. Another one is, do you want to change anything about that? So if they're talking about their job or some other situation they have, asking, is there anything you're looking to change about that? It's a good way to just kind of go a little deeper and see and explore. Another classic one is, how did you get into that, right? If they're talking about something they're really interested in or something they're passionate about or their work, how did you get into that? Will prompt them to launch into more of a story. And again, you're going to find more threads to pull for conversations from that. If they're talking about an experience, you can say, what did you like about that? Or what did you not like about that? So that's like really good if they're talking about traveling or other experiences they've had to get them to share a little more. And other ideas for this, again, just to get them share more is, what would you do different next time? Or is that how you expected it would go? So again, like it's really about prompting them to either dive deeper, like share more details, or reflect and kind of make new connections with you. Maybe you're the only person who's ever given them the floor to talk about that thing, or you're the only person who's ever prompted them to think about something in a different way. And I think that's where the magic is created in conversation, especially with someone new that you've never met before. Okay, so there was one question that was missing from my initial list of the top 10 questions. Did you catch it? Because this question gets special attention. It's probably the most important one that most people skip on dates. And that question is, what are you hoping to get out of dating right now? What are you hoping to get out of dating right now? Please ask this question on dates. And please have an answer to this question yourself, right? If you're going to ask about their dating goals and intentions, you need to know yours. And look, you don't necessarily have to ask a question to get into this topic of dating goals. You can bring up your goals and the future you see for yourself. And you can say, like, you see yourself having a partner or a family in the next couple of years or whatever it is. And then you can prompt them to share as well to see if you're on the same page or close to being on the same page. This is crucial because it will take a lot of the confusion out of early dating. You're not a mind reader, nor are they. You need to talk about what you both want and why you're even on the date. Yeah, some people lie. Okay, yeah, sure. Some people don't know, but you've got to ask. Just because some people are lying, that doesn't mean that everyone is. And there's only one way to know, and that is by directly asking. Don't assume you are on the date because you both want a relationship. Talk about it, get on the same page, or figure out if you're not. And I'm encouraging you to remember that you're not going to scare off someone who wants a relationship by saying you want one. I mean, this is the point of dating, right? In a way. I mean, you're on a date, you're allowed to ask them why you were on the date. And don't try to be the cool girl or cool guy, right? Don't be too cool for school. Own what you want and make sure to bring that up on the first date, preferably towards the end. Do not open the date with this question. I would say ask it towards the end once you get a sense of whether or not you even want a second date with this person. If you don't want a second date with this person after you've talked to them for 30 minutes, you already know it's not going to work out. You don't have to ask that question. But I think if you're enjoying your time, absolutely do not want to skip this question. Let's talk about bad questions to ask on a date. Generally, the main categories of bad questions to avoid are judgmental questions, sexual questions, and really, really personal questions that you probably shouldn't be asking someone you have only spent like 4 hours with. The number one worst question is though, and this one is extremely common, unfortunately. I mean, let me know if you've been asked this question is, why are you single? Why are you single? I think this question comes up because it's a common but not great way to be like, what is your dating history? How did you get here on this date with me? I don't think people mean this question the way it sounds. At least I hope they don't. I think sometimes they think it's a compliment, like, so you're so great. Why are you single? Like, what's the catch or something? But it's never a good question. Please don't ask this question. Here are some alternatives to this question if you are the person who does ask, why are you single? What's your approach to dating right now? What made you decide to start dating again? What's your favorite thing about being single? Or what's your favorite thing about dating? So, those are other ways to get into this topic of dating and like their dating history and your dating history without being like, so why are you single? And here are some questions to help you get a better sense of their relationship history, which I think, these types of questions are more appropriate maybe for a second or third date. I wouldn't really get into relationship history too much on a first date, but here are some ideas. You can say, like, what have you learned about yourself from past relationships? Great question. What's something that dating has taught you? What are you hoping to get out of dating right now? Most important question. And what does an amazing relationship look like to you? These are way more positive than why are you single? And look, yes, learning about someone's relationship history is important and relevant in the early dating process, but we have to remember that someone's dating experience doesn't define them. When you're on a first date, try to focus on things you have in common and learning about each other's life experiences outside of dating. Getting into conversations about their and your relationship history will be more fruitful and insightful when you have more trust established anyway. Okay, let's get into the worst questions. Questions you should never ask on a date. Tell me about yourself. It's like the laziest question. What's fun about you? That's a question that I got on a date. Ugh, I hate that question. What was your ex like? I don't even know why this is relevant on a first date, but don't ask this question. Any question relating to penis size. By the way, some of these were crowdsourced. That was one that came from Instagram. There are a lot of questions about penis size that are so inappropriate. Do you have any other dates this week? The second you start talking about other dates with a date is the second that you are friend zoning that person. Okay? Don't talk about your other dates with your date, please. It just completely kills the vibe. Have you ever been pregnant? Nosy much? I mean, wow, not a good question to ask. What's your relationship like with your dad? I think this question could work in some ways, but I think that sometimes also the way that this is asked is like, do you have daddy issues? I don't know. That's how I think I read it and how other people are reading it sometimes. Aren't you worried about your eggs shriveling up? Not funny, not a good question. What can you do for me as my potential girlfriend? Cannot believe someone even asked this question. I guess I should believe it because I have really seen it all, but like, wow, it's a horrible question. What's your body count? No. The phrase body count sucks. It's like sounds like a murder. Like it sounds horrible. And just remember that you don't have to share that information with anyone, especially in early dating. That is completely irrelevant and this question is so inappropriate. Did your ex make you orgasm? I think this question is just very insecure. Have you ever had a threesome? Okay, sure. This question, if you're already talking about, if you're already like sexting or if you're already like talking about sexual things and fine, maybe this question could be fine in context, but I think on a first date, not appropriate at all. When was the last time you had sex? Again, not appropriate for a first date. I think it could work in a conversation down the line if you're discussing sex, if you're talking about STIs and sexual health, but not on a first date. When was the last time you cried? I'm a believer in keeping things mostly positive in early dating if you can. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to like promote toxic positivity here or anything. Like, I obviously that's not realistic. But this question, I guess unless you can describe a time where you're crying of happiness, I don't know if this question is like the most pleasant to discuss on a date. And the last one on this list is, would you ever get breast implants? Why? So again, most of these questions came from Instagram. So thank you for submitting. And I'm just so sad that these questions were even asked on a date. Please don't ask these. All right, that was just for fun. These common questions are kind of like stale, but let's talk about how to make them a little more fun and dynamic on dates. The first one is the classic, what do you do? Rather than giving just your job title, here's how to make your answer more dynamic. Have a more playful response. You can say, like, for work or for fun. You get one guess and then see what they come up with. You know, you can turn it into a little game. Or you can kind of direct the conversation somewhere else and say something like, I work in tech, but honestly, my favorite thing to do is Pilates. So that kind of answer keeps the conversation from feeling like an interview. You can add, you can give more information. You don't have to stick to just sharing your job. Or you can say something like, I do product marketing, but what I actually love is running local community events. Again, I'm just highlighting this type of answer because you are more than your job, right? And you want to present that on your date. I would say generally avoid just stating your job title and complaining about your job immediately. Of course, again, I'm not saying to be inauthentic. If you don't like your job, you don't have to hide that. But I think that there is a way to talk about something you don't like that isn't complaining on a date. Again, to someone who does not know you and probably doesn't care yet. Back to our favorite question, why are you single? This question can feel like a trap, okay? And the key to this is owning your answer with confidence. You don't have to get defensive, you don't have to over explain. This question, unfortunately, will probably come up on your dates because not everyone listens to this podcast, even though I'm working on that. So you could say something like, for the same reason you are, probably, right? You can kind of throw this question back at them in a lighthearted way. You can say, I've been really intentional about who I date and I don't want to rush into anything just for the sake of it. Honest. I mean, that answer applies probably to many of you listening. So that's another way of saying like I've been focusing on other things. Maybe you have degrees, your career, your family, whatever it is. Dating isn't the point of life. Your whole life hasn't revolved around relationships. You've been doing other stuff. That's totally fine. Generally avoid sounding bitter. Anything like, well, the dating pool sucks isn't going to be a great answer to this question. And also avoid over explaining, like saying that your past relationship ended 3 years ago and you took time for yourself and then tried dating apps and then you tried to hire a matchmaker, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to like launch into the whole history of your dating life. Another common question you'll probably get is, why did your last relationship end? So, the goal here is to be honest without oversharing or trash talking your ex. Keep it simple and focus on what you learned and what you're going to take into your future relationships. So you could say, like, it just ran its course. We weren't the right fit long term, and that's okay. Easy. Or you can say, it taught me a lot about what I need in a relationship. And I realized that, I learned XYZ, and now I'm really clear on what I'm looking for. Great way to twist that answer into the present instead of focusing on a past relationship. Or you can try something like, we had a great connection, but we also had fundamental differences that made it hard to see a future together. Again, that this type of answer is a little vague, sure, but you don't owe them an explanation, especially on a first or second date when you barely know them. You don't need to tell them every detail. I suggest avoiding trash talking your ex, like don't say things like she was crazy or he cheated on me and ruined my trust in men. Not necessary on a date. Even if your ex sucked and did something horrible, when you trash talk someone in front of someone you barely know, it's never painting you in a good light. Also avoid playing the victim, right? I did everything right and they just left. That kind of thing. Show accountability. Show that you know how to take accountability. And don't go into too much detail. Again, you don't need to give every single detail of what happened and why it ended. So those are just some ideas for handling those very common questions like, why are you single? What do you do for work? Why did your last relationship end? Things that probably will come up in early dating. And I hope that these like scripts will help you just have a more confident answer that won't derail your date. And speaking of that, I want to shift gears and talk about communicating tricky things in early dating. So some of these might come up on a first date, some of them might come up later. And I wanna give you these scripts and kind of these ways to talk about these things because I want you to have more confidence and just know that that thing you're scared to talk about is not a reason you are undateable. You are dateable. Everyone has that thing they're uncomfortable bringing up or more than one thing, and whatever that thing is for you, it doesn't make you like damaged goods or not choosable. You are worthy of being chosen. You are worthy of finding someone great. And I hope these scripts help you kind of share with more confidence. So let's say your date asks, like, are you close with your family? And your immediate thought is, yikes, no. But you don't want to kill the vibe or trauma dump. So here's how to respond. You can say, I wish we were closer, but we have very different ways of seeing the world. And I have some great friends who are like family. The general idea here that I hope you're noticing is if there's something that you don't want to talk about that's hard for you to talk about it, you can pivot to something positive in your answer. You could be like, well, this is the situation, but I have this instead that I like that is bringing me joy. Like, I don't like this that much in my life, but I have this. So, that's the formula here. Or you can say, we're not super close, but I have great people in my life, and that's what matters to me. So I hope that makes sense. You don't have to go into a whole backstory of your family drama. Again, you can keep it light, you can keep it vague, especially in early dating. You don't need to share every detail. Trust that if your relationship unfolds, they will get the whole story eventually, right? They will get all the details. When you meet the right person, there's no deadline for getting all this information out. And again, this isn't a reason that you are undateable, it's just part of your life. Everyone has tough things they're dealing with in life. Don't treat this thing like it's a ticking time bomb. And the second that someone finds out, they're going to leave you. That's absolutely not the case for the right person. All right, the second one is bringing up STIs and STI testing. And hopefully this isn't coming up on a first date, but I assume that if you're going to get physically intimate with someone, it will come up. I hope it comes up. It's important to talk about this stuff if you're going to be physically intimate with someone. So here's how to bring it up casually. You can say like, "Hey, before we go any further, I always like to check in about testing and safety. When was the last time you got tested? Again, it shows that you are mature. It shows that you're responsible. These are great things. You're not going to scare someone off. If someone's like scared off by this conversation, that is a huge red flag. I mean, your intention is to keep everyone involved safe. Nothing wrong with that. And if you do have an STI, you can say, I want to be upfront. I have herpes or HPV, whatever it is. I take precautions and it's under control. And I would love to talk about what that means for us. Keeping it open. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. It's not scary, right? And I've had guests come on to talk about this before, but like the calmer and more confident you are when you bring these things up, the calmer and more confident the other person will be on the receiving end. So just keep that in mind that your demeanor and how you treat these things will directly affect how they receive them. By the way, bringing up STIs, this is just responsible dating. If they react badly, they are not your person. Another one is having a chronic disorder or disability. This, again, might come up on a first date or later. So if you have a chronic illness, it might be hard to figure out when to tell them or how to tell them, how to talk about it. So here's some ideas. You can introduce it naturally, like casually. Say, like, I'm usually in bed by 10 because my body doesn't do great with late nights. I have a chronic illness, so I have to take care of myself, but it doesn't stop me from enjoying drinks with a cute guy like you. Again, you can keep it light, flirty, casual. You can just simply explain, I have this illness, so I do this to take care of myself, and that's just how it goes. Or you can say, like, I have whatever your condition is, so I manage my energy differently, but I found a great rhythm that works for me. Again, focusing on the positives, focusing on what you've figured out, what you've learned, and that makes the other person immediately feel at ease, and it makes you seem like you know what's up. And just remember that your health is not a deal breaker. You get to set the tone for how your date perceives it. So, speaking of that, another topic that's kind of not fun to talk about that you might be experiencing right now is being between jobs or being unemployed. And this would probably come up on a first date if you're going to talk about your jobs. So, you can say, I'm actually between jobs right now. I left my last role because it wasn't the right fit. And I'm using this time to figure out what's next. Or you can say, I just wrapped up a job, taking a little breather before my next move. Or maybe I'm in the middle of a career pivot and I'm excited for what's next. Talk about what's next. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about the actions you're taking, not about getting, obviously, yes, you can talk a little about getting laid off or whatever it was or quitting your job, but it's going to feel a lot more comfortable and you're going to come away from the date with more positivity if you focus on the positive aspects of what you're doing. Again, not trying to force you to be in a different mental space. You can acknowledge sadness and grief and loss on dates, especially even on a first date, but you don't want to like stay in that space for too long. You don't want to hang out there for too long. It's okay to acknowledge things, but you don't have to like this isn't your therapy session. This isn't your time to, debrief or like decompress. This is your time to figure out if you want another date with this person. And just remember that being between jobs or your job in general doesn't define who you are as a person. All right, last one, last sticky subject that might come up on a date is being recently divorced or separated or just out of a relationship, like recently. So maybe you're worried that they'll think you're not ready to date or they'll be concerned about your ex in the picture or whatever. Here's how to be upfront, but not over explain. You can say, I got out of a relationship 6 months ago and I took time to reflect before jumping back into dating. I'm in a great place now and I'm excited to meet new people. Or maybe say, my last relationship ended recently, but I'm dating intentionally and I know what I want. Or I got divorced last year and I've been working on myself and now I feel ready to get back out there. Brief, you're not lying, you're not hiding the truth, but you just don't have to give every detail. If you treat something like a shameful confession, it's just always going to feel that way. But if you own it, like it's just another part of who you are, your date will take those cues from you. You're allowed to have a history, you're allowed to have baggage. We all do. The key is knowing when to share it, how to frame it, and trusting that the right person will be curious, not judgmental or turned off. All right, so we've gone over how to have better conversations in early dating, figuring out what to ask, what to not ask, and how to handle tricky personal questions. And the bottom line is dating is about connection, and connection comes from curiosity. Asking better questions, actually listening, and letting the conversation flow will help you accomplish that. So here's your challenge. On your next date, or even in your next dating app conversation, Try out one of the questions in today's episode and see what happens. Or you can try out one of the answers we shared, about navigating those sticky situations. Notice how the conversation shifts when you ditch the surface level small talk and really get to know the person in front of you. And if you do this, I want to hear all about it. So you can DM me on Instagram at dating.intentionally. You can comment below on Spotify or just share your experience with me through email. I'm at datingintentionallypod@gmail.com. And again, if you want the full list of the best questions, just head to the show notes below. There's a free download for you. You can copy paste the whole list onto your notes in your phone so you can always have it handy. All right, so these questions are from Spotify comments. If you're listening on Spotify, you can drop a question in each episode. You can comment, you can share your thoughts. It's fun to connect with you there. So just don't forget, if you're listening on Spotify, you can do that. So this question I'm about to get into came from my episode on showing interest when you're interested. This person writes, he's proactive, he texts me, he plans and pays for dates and shows interest. We've been seeing each other for almost 3 months. But every time I talk about a commitment, he just plays it cool and tells me he doesn't see commitment as a classic one. I'm just confused. He said he isn't seeing anyone else, but when we talk about us or even friends or other stuff, he's cold. Okay, so this isn't a question, it's a scenario. Here's my advice. It sounds like that you're just not aligned on what you want in a relationship, even though you're only seeing each other exclusively. You want what he's calling a classic committed relationship where you're using labels like boyfriend and girlfriend, and he doesn't. And since that's the case, instead of settling for less than what you want here, I would move along. You're not asking for too much, so don't let him make you feel like you are. But it's really not worth trying to change someone's mind on this type of thing or convincing them to do it your way. That's just not going to lead to a healthy, happy dynamic in your relationship. So, yeah, I would walk away. It's been 3 months. He's getting exactly what he wants, which is commitment without labels, which is not what you want. And that's not fair to you. So the next question is, are you going to talk about the friend zone? Situationship sounds a lot like a friend zone. What is the difference? So this question was on my episode from last Friday about situationships, and the difference between a situationship and the friend zone is that when you are in a situationship, you're still dating and probably hooking up. Whereas if you are putting someone in the friend zone, you're probably not interacting with them in a romantic way at all. That is the main difference in my mind. I would love to know whether or not you agree. Friend zone is like we are friends, there's no romantic connection. Situationship is like there is a romantic connection, but we want different things, so we can't move forward either way. I hope that clears that up. And the last question is, how does someone who seemed to communicate so well fail to tell me about their intimacy issues due to health reasons? So, great question. I mean, obviously, I don't know this person personally, so I don't really know their specific reasons why they fail to tell you about their intimacy issues that are connected to their health. But I think, like what we talked about in this episode, some things are just tricky to talk about and it's hard to bring them up. It's very possible that if someone has intimacy issues, like something like ED or I don't know, just something like that could be uncomfortable to talk about and it could be something they're insecure about. Even a great communicator has things they're insecure about that are hard to talk about. So I would give people grace and get curious instead of judgmental or annoyed that they didn't tell you because health issues are hard to talk about, intimacy issues are hard to talk about. You've got to be open and receptive and understanding that these are not fun things to share. So it makes sense that like they're kind of closed off or they withheld that information until they had to reveal it. No one's perfect. So I think again, someone can be a great communicator and be insecure about things that they're not going to share so readily and that's okay. I think as long as they're sharing at all at some point is fine. I hope that helps. I also want to thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. I would love it if you shared this episode and the show with someone who is navigating dating and might need a little confidence boost or some tough love or just like support in their dating life. If any of these episodes have helped you in your journey, you can help other daters discover the show by leaving a review on Apple or on Spotify or following the show wherever you're listening. All of it helps, and I appreciate it so much. Once again, I'm Talia. This has been Dating Intentionally, and I'll see you next time.